So what are we going to do to produce the electricity? Well, that's the essential question that the Inflation Reduction Act seeks to answer by putting to work not $700 billion of appropriated money, but when properly costed $2 to $3 trillion of money over the next decade is going to be deployed principally on windmills, solar arrays, and electric vehicles in the interest of an energy transition to fuel what everybody agrees will be greater energy demand for a future. Let me calibrate where we are in the energy transition and then turn to a question. So that money will be spent to buy windmills, solar panels, and battery supplies that are supplied by China. The Inflation Reduction Act, according to the administration, will reduce the U.S. emissions of carbon dioxide by a gigaton per year 10 years from now. China will increase its carbon dioxide emissions by 3 gigatons per year within the next decade because they're burning more coal to fabricate the energy-intensive silicon. They make 90% of the world's silicon to sell to us to increase the cost of our economy. They make 80% of the input materials for lithium batteries and will for the next decade. And they make, by the way, 60% of the world's aluminum. And if this keeps going this way, they'll make most of the world's graphene, I would add. Something George should worry about. I don't think that's going to be a good thing for the climate apocalyptics because they are able to do that because their grid is 2/3 coal-fired and will be for the next half century. So we have a policy to increase the cost of our energy, and the West is doing the same in Europe, and China has a policy to decrease and maintain low-cost energy to produce energy-intensive goods for us and for the world. The money that's been spent so far, $5 trillion on avoiding hydrocarbons over the last 2 decades, has resulted in a world that today 3.8% of the world's energy comes from wind and solar. 3.8. The share of world's energy supplied by hydrocarbons has decreased in that time by 2 percentage points. The absolute consumption of hydrocarbons has gone up by the amount equal to 2 Saudi Arabia's worth of production. So we have not caused a transition. In fact, burning wood still supplies nearly 3 times as much energy to the world as all the wind and solar combined. There is no evidence of an energy transition, but there is evidence of a lot of money being spent. All the things I've said to you, you have probably, unless you read what I write, haven't heard, because I'm in a new category that's been defined by the thought police called climate solutions disinformation, climate solutions denialism. Okay. So first I want to put to Michael the question, since I know he agrees with me that the energy plan we have in play is economically insane, socially and morally destructive, what are we to do? What's the energy policy? What's, our title? Reasonable and pragmatic. That's a tepid title for the Swan Song panel, but what's reasonable and what's pragmatic? What should we do, given what I just said?
I think the most important thing is to embrace energy abundance. Energy is what, the old idea from the 60s was that to save nature, you need to reduce energy consumption and materials consumption. But as you pointed out in your really terrific book, The Bottomless Well, which had a big impact on me, and also I point out in Apocalypse Never that using energy is how we save nature, and that energy is often a substitute for nature. So I showed that slide at the end showing Spain and France having allowed, more grasslands and wood and forests have returned in those countries as they've produced more food on less land. The same thing's happened here in the United States with the Maine woods, the New England woods, Martha's Vineyard. They've been reforested because the productivity of agriculture has increased in places like Iowa. Well, all of that agricultural productivity increased thanks to energy in the form of fertilizer, tractors, irrigation. And so the older view is wrong. We save nature by not using it, and we avoid using nature by using it more efficiently or creating substitutes from energy. Farming being the big one, but really the substitution of coal and fossil fuels for wood has allowed forests to regrow, and then the use of energy in agriculture has allowed for more intensive production. I do think, though, that we should also embrace not all fossil fuels are equal. Natural gas is obviously better. If you ask a high school student, what do you think is a better fuel from an environmental point of view, burning coal or burning gas? Everybody knows burning gas. They can predict that burning coal in their kitchen would create a huge mess, but they burn gas every day. And we have abundant gas. our mutual friend Jesse Ausubel, following the Russians, thinks that the amount of gas is infinite because it's produced by the Earth's core. It's a minority view, but
I'm in that camp.
you are. Are you
Abiogenic
You're an
gas.
abiotic guy. Yeah,
I'm an abiotic guy. It's
That's awesome.
but there's both. Methane, anyway.
Yeah,
We don't want to digress on abiotic gas.
Yeah.
But for practical purposes, it's an infinite supply.
That's right. And so there's no need for solid fuels anymore. I mean, this is the good news. Nobody needs to use wood or dung or coal. You can use natural gas. But that means we have to unleash the gas production. We need more pipelines. We need more LNG facilities. I think it's a moral issue. There's no reason that people in Africa or sub-Saharan Africa or South Asia should be using anything but gas or propane or butane or kerosene. So for me, abundance is the key, and then moving up the energy ladder from coal, wood and dung and coal to natural gas, and ultimately to uranium. And my view of nuclear, I'm a heretic among heretics because I think that the best nuclear is the nuclear we have. The second best is nuclear similar to the kind that we have. These are very path-dependent technology, very path-dependent, capital-intensive, slow turnover. Nuclear plants should last 100 years. So I'm not in the category of Bill Gates and others that support these futuristic small reactors. I think the nuclear we have is the best. But that's the vision, and I think that if the political right wants to compete with the left on an environmental agenda, it would be a gas and nuclear agenda, or what's sometimes called end-to-end.
So you and I are in the same camp.
Thank you.
On nukes. Macron is going to do exactly what you are hoping and recommend. He's going to double the nuclear fleet. Germany should restart theirs because they can be restarted. If you want nukes, you build what we know how to build. But I'm in the middle camp that I'm desperate to unleash the 72 other designs. There's 72 different designs for nuclear power plants, all of which are feasible technically. We don't know which ones are economical. It'll take us a decade to figure that out. Let's start. But if you want to build nukes, you build what we know how to build. But Jesse, you mentioned Jesse Ausubel. So what he has pointed out in his data is something utterly fascinating. I want to turn to Todd on because he has pointed out that the abundance that's needed is for the world's 6.5 billion who have nothing or very little. And we in the West have been dematerializing. He and I have some arguments about what that really means, but largely speaking, as we improve our sophistication, our information systems, as we improve our ability to understand how to use energy, we have been decreasing rapidly the energy cost per unit of economic output, really remarkably. It's really hard for anybody else to do it in sub-Saharan Africa, but it's easier for us. So the moral case I would make is add to yours. If we want to look for a political meet in the middle, we'll do nukes, more gas, but also more efficiency because we now have a new tool for that. AI is certainly an incredible tool for sophisticated nations to do that. And Todd has done a lot of work thinking about the link between what we can produce and then optimizing and minimizing the consequences of using, because all use of energy, including my favorite, nukes, is consequential. So Todd, tell us what you're up to with AI and energy.
Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about sort of the political challenges of I think we can absolutely agree that energy abundance is where we should go for a variety of reasons. One, either to accommodate AI's increased demand, increased needs, but also to address the problems in Africa and other places where they simply need energy to grow. So, for those of you who don't know me, I'm the environmental director at the Washington Policy Center. I actually have been doing this for about 25 years. Used to work at the State Department of Natural Resources. After 25 years of being a center-right environmentalist in Washington State, I drink a lot, but I've also learned a lot about sort of the mindset and how you deal with that mindset. And so your presentation was really fantastic because I think one of the key things that people don't understand, they talk about environmentalism as a religion, and I think it absolutely is in many ways, but it's also an identity. People think of identity politics as, being race or gender or other things like that, but when somebody makes an issue an identity, they are virtually impervious to sort of rational thought and data and things like that. I'll give you a great example. I was giving a presentation to the Seattle Chamber of Commerce about green building standards. And the research that I had done showed that green schools in Washington State were actually using more energy per square foot than the non-green schools in those same districts. Wow. Okay.
How embarrassing. I need to see that.
Yeah, and so what's interesting is that I did it in Washington State, and then I started doing it in other states as well.
This would fall under a misinformation campaign that would have been long ago suppressed.
Yes.
No wonder nobody's heard of it.
So, and the beauty was that I was just showing the data, and there was a member of the committee who had come in, who had biked there and was in a full bike suit with bike shoes. And he, in the middle of my presentation, literally pounded his fists on the table and said, "What you're saying is immoral." Well, all I was saying was, look, here's the actual literal performance from the utility data in this. And he was rejecting it because what environmentalists who have created environmentalism as an identity here is not the data, it is you're a phony. You're living a fraud. And so that was what my first book was about, called Eco-Fads, is how people identify with these issues and how they fall for these fads and how they internalize them. And so it was very frustrating, and I wanted to see, as somebody who cared about the environment, how we can do more rational policy and how we can overcome this identity barrier that is built up by the disinformation that you're talking about. And we see that disinformation still today in Washington State. So something I was going through some utility data earlier this year, because we now have a carbon cap and trade in Washington State. And so the Utility Commission is approving rate increases for various utilities to accommodate the new CO2 charge that's in Washington State. And so they approved one for natural gas for Puget Sound Energy, but they also added a thing that said it is illegal for Puget Sound Energy to list this charge, this carbon charge, on customers' bills, because they said it would be too confusing. Now,
This sounds familiar from a speech we just heard.
yes,
Don't let the facts confuse us here.
that's exactly right. And they went on to say that for those families who get a rebate, because there is a low-income rebate that basically removes that charge from them, they said that you have to list. So listing the charge was too confusing. Listing the rebate for people who got it was required. So you would have this strange situation where you would actually have families who got the rebate who would not know what the rebate was for. They would actually think that their bills were going down rather than up. So disinformation is part of this whole thing. So the question, back to your question, how do you deal with this? And that's what the work that I have done is about, is that we can fight this stuff head on. And that's the work that I do, that Michael does, that a lot of us do every day, is to expose it, to fight it. But fundamentally, what you have is a fight, a political fight. And sometimes you win those fights and sometimes you don't. We now have an opportunity to get around that fight and to put more power in the hands of individuals, because when you feel the consequences of your own decisions, you are more likely to make rational decisions. The guy in the bike suit could deny that green schools used more energy despite the data because he felt no consequences, but he got an emotional benefit from believing that green schools were better. If he had to pay those prices, it would be very different. And in fact, many of the school directors that I spoke with around the country would email me, and I would always get this email from these folks saying, it said, "Hey, I read your piece about my school district." And I would go, "Uh-oh, I am about to get yelled at." And all of them said, "Thank you for saying this, because I'm having to deal with this and I can't get my school board to recognize it." Technology and AI now allow us to put power in the hands of individuals so that disinformation has a less powerful impact on them. Disinformation in the energy sector to the environment sector works well when decisions are made by government and politicians. That's why they banned Puget Sound Energy from listing it, the cost on their bill. But the more you see your own costs, and thanks to AI, you can now do it. On my phone, I have an app that can tell me literally to the watt how much my house is using right now. Because we have access to information, and artificial intelligence can help us use that information to conserve energy and save money in a way that we never could before. That, I think, is as exciting an aspect of AI and energy as anything else. So we need to keep doing what Michael is doing and what I'm doing in fighting the disinformation and fighting the wrong information and exposing it. But fundamentally, if we don't break the political control of energy decisions, it's just planners versus planners. Some planners choose wind and solar, some planners choose nuclear and natural gas, and the people who end up with the decisions are the public. Give the public more power, and we can make the bad decisions less harmful, and we can make that so that when people make bad decisions, they pay the costs.